young scholars. So the last two labs we did, the most recent one we looked at, do all living things give off carbon dioxide? So it was a virtual lab, but we took the test tubes and we had phenyl red in there, and we wanted to see if the phenyl red turned a different color, like an orange or a yellow, and that determined if there was CO2 present. So we put in a live cricket, we put in some sprouted radish seeds, we put our own carbon dioxide breath there, and we used some yeast, and they all did turn the phenyl red into orange. So yes, we should have determined that all living things do give off carbon dioxide. So that was the goal of this lab, and then we did the lab virtually. So what did we figure out? Do all living things give off carbon dioxide? We said yes. Do they all respire or do cellular respiration? We said yes. What are the requirements of cellular respiration? We will get to. But do you think all organisms in all environments meet these requirements? We will also be able to write that down. So we are going to take, more questions to consider before we take down our notes. What about life forms without mitochondria that, like bacteria, do they respire or do something else? Well, we could think about the yeast. That was a single-celled microorganism, so it doesn't, I'm not 100% sure. What happens when little or no oxygen is available in the environment? We looked at that with our lactic acid field of burn lab. For example, what is happening when we exercise hard and are out of breath for a long time? So when you go breathless. So that would be, how do living things get usable energy from food without oxygen? That would be that lactic acid fermentation is what it's technically called, but that lactic acid buildup with that anaerobic systems. So let's make sure we get all of this written down. So you're on page 56 of our notes, so I'll write that at the top. So the unity and diversity lab that we did with the test tubes and the video, or the question we were trying to answer is, do all give off carbon dioxide? And we ended up saying that yes. So that yes, all life does take in oxygen and give off carbon dioxide, and that would be even plants. So those radish seeds that were growing, they still do take in some oxygen and release some carbon dioxide. Obviously, they mainly go through photosynthesis, which we'll get to later, and they do take in a lot more carbon dioxide, but they do also partake in cellular respiration. So how does this relate to the unity? It would be that all living things partake or respire. And then diversity. We learned that there are different ways to do this. So we talked about anaerobic and aerobic. We talked about if they don't have mitochondria, things like that. So there are different ways to accomplish this. So then when we needed to revise our model, so we asked, what if there's no oxygen to complete this reaction, or what if they don't have mitochondria? So this would be our revised model. So other reactions like that lactic acid fermentation can produce our biologically usable energy. It's just less efficient, which is why it comes secondary. And then also this does happen in some organisms that have evolved under different environmental conditions and in our own bodies during times when oxygen is not readily available. So this would be like anaerobic respiration with the Feel the Burn lab. So we're just gonna quickly go through fermentation reaction. So this is how yeast and like I said, like lactic acid fermentation can happen in without oxygen. So you get two ATPs with or without oxygen. Um, this happens from when we need to get energy. So with glucose, it can break down into these two molecules called pyruvate, and it can either go through fermentation in human muscle cells or it can go through cellular respiration if oxygen is present. So if no oxygen is present, then it would go through fermentation. So like if yeast doesn't have oxygen or like human cells, muscle cells don't have enough oxygen, it would go through these other pathways called fermentation. So this was just showing that if oxygen is present, it goes to cellular respiration, you get those 36 energy ATP molecules, but without oxygen, you only get 2. You don't get the other 34. So that's why it's kind of secondary. So in thinking about what we've learned, is cellular respiration an example of unity or diversity, or are there aspects of each? We kind of said that there were aspects of each. By unity, we noticed that all living things do respire or give off carbon dioxide. And then diversity is there's different ways to accomplish this, like through fermentation or through the whole pathway of cellular respiration. Using what we've learned now, how would we explain the phenomenon of the biggest loser? So I talked to you guys about this a few times ago, where this guy, he started working out. He was at 403 pounds. Obviously, yes, some of it was that he was eating better, but he still was eating. He didn't like go on a crash diet or anything, so he was still taking in mass and matter and energy. And he went down to 188 pounds 5 months later. So what happened to those 215 pounds of matter that the man lost? Like, where did that go? Through what we have learned, what are the outputs of our body in cellular respiration? So we take in glucose or sugar or food, and we take in oxygen, and we release. What do we breathe out? We breathe out carbon dioxide and obviously water. So where can we guess or hypothesize where did his mass or matter go? It had to go somewhere because through the law of conservation of mass, we can't just destroy it. It doesn't just disappear. It obviously stays somewhere, but where is that somewhere? So right now, I want you to think in Doodlebox T on page 56, think about, and you can talk to a partner, where do you think the mass went? So your goal is to come up with your best detailed explanation to the question about the matter, where did it go? We're not using whiteboards, but just try and write down any ideas that you came up with. So I do want to write down a few things or ideas. I'm actually going to go down to the bottom and about the class questions. So a lot of people asked or wondered throughout this process, like how often did this man work out? Was he like only working out or did he have a job?
Kyle LeMay, please come to the main office. Kyle LeMay, please come to the main office.
Again, I told you he didn't like crash diet or anything. He still was eating, but then people wondered, what did he eat? And then another question people had were just like, what was his daily life like? What, like, was he walking? Was he standing at work? Did he get a stand-up desk or was he sitting? Like, what kind of was his daily life like? So then thinking about this, let's try and figure out where his mass or matter went. So some ideas that have come up was that it turned into muscle, which yes, some of it did. But again, he went from like over 200 pounds to 188. So he still did lose some mass. Some people have said that it was burned off as sweat, which is also partly true. The water that was released through the reaction. Some people thought that some of it got lost in body waste, which yes, but that wouldn't be enough to like lose all your mass. That still obviously is happening. But the main source about where it went was it was breathed out as carbon dioxide. And this would make sense because our reaction is taking, let me just get the reaction quick. Our reaction right here is taking in our food and our oxygen, and our outputs are carbon dioxide and water. And remember, we said an atom and an element and a molecule has mass. And then through our exercise lab, we said that our breathing rate increases. So the more you breathe out, the more carbon dioxide you're letting go of. So the more you exercise, the more you're breathing out this mass or this matter of carbon dioxide and sweating it off, and it's going out into the atmosphere as matter and mass. So you can actually, or you actually do, lose weight through a little bit of sweat, but mostly your exhales of carbon dioxide, which is crazy, but interesting to think about at the same time. So that is it for respiration, and then we'll get into some parts of